Before the panel weighs in on a variety of issues, we're going to come right into this article written by Blaine Holt. We have a global systemic financial reset of all sorts taking place, some overtly, some clandestinely. We have stocks at all-time highs, crypto on the rise and fall and rise and fall. We've got the Federal Reserve note and a gold commodity-backed treasury note. We have Fort Knox on the radar, a QFS system potentially coming into place here, replacing traditional banking, bye-bye SWIFT system. Let's have our guests weigh in. Retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt, what is this article all about? What's happening in the banking world? How would you like to start peeling this onion?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you drawing some light to it. It came out today. And what spawned it was I have listened to macroeconomist after macroeconomist, those that I respect, those that have my undivided attention when they write an article or post something. And to a person, I find that they're missing the forest through the trees on their analysis of Scott Bessent's actions as our Treasury Secretary. In fact, I think the last straw for me was in marginalizing his actions on doubling the buy down of American debt from now until November 4. And you know, if you keep it in just an economics political kind of prism, the cynic will say, "Oh, well, that's simply to garner votes because he's doing this to drop interest rates somewhat." And nothing could be further from the truth. It's so much more complicated than that. And that's just one piece of an economic campaign puzzle that is really part of this bigger war that is sovereigntists versus globalists under President Trump's leadership. And what I mean by that is, instead of viewing that as a snarky little way to do yield curve control on our long bond, and now somehow you're going to have an American feel a difference at the ballot box because their mortgage might have slipped by 1/10 of a percentage point. What you should see is that in combination with our actions with Japan to buy the yen, to halt the what we call the carry trade, which is basically drying up liquidity for the financialists and the banksters, which is putting them onto a run. Because if you look at the Iran piece and hammering away at Lloyd's of London, the blockade, taking the UAE out of the OPEC system, then you start to see these puzzle pieces emerge into a pattern. And that pattern is more of a warriors campaign that started with taking down the cartels, which are the vascular system to the globalists. And so if you don't want one world government, CBDCs, digital ID, social credit scores, then you've got to be cheering on Scott Bessent, because these are monumental moves on the board. And I think they go to, probably in the short term, a very painful place. I think our markets are in trouble regardless when we look at private credit. But on the other side of that, you give the United States and Bessent full carte blanche then to change over to a brand new monetary system, one that will vanquish these globalists, I believe, in the longer run, and be good for all of us, and usher in a new era of freedom that disintermediates the bankers. And so I'll lead it off there, but that's what caused me to write the article, to say, you got this wrong. You got to take a step back and look at Bessent more as a military general than looking at him as a treasury guy who's taken out the Fed.
Wow, that's a powerful statement, and I agree with it completely. Where can people find your article, Blaine?
Come to Newsmax.com. On the insiders page, you'll find mine. It's called The Irascible Disruptor. And I write once a week there. And this week was, I got in just under the deadline to make this available to everybody.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we're discussing it. I have just a couple of related questions to the subject at hand. Oil has spiked up quite a bit. Last time I checked, it was over $90 a barrel. And I realize that's the disruption in the Straits of Hormuz. When, in your crystal ball, when do you see that settling down, and will we see oil I'm sure the president would like to see oil ultimately at about $40 or $50 a barrel at some point. Do you think we get there? And if so, possibly when?
Yeah, we're going to get there. It would be a fool's errand to measure out the timeline or to predict what the timeline's going to be, because we're all kind of waiting on this shift to what will be the Iranian Revolution. Now, I am told that conditions are nearly all set for a revolution to start in Iran, but until they receive a green light from CENTCOM that we have degraded the war machine of Iran and the IRGC enough, they'll only get one shot to take back their country. But when you start to see those things happen, get ready for an oil crash. And I get $90 a barrel is bad, but so is $150 a barrel. And Biden achieved that one without anything even really going on. So we can hold out a little bit longer for this, because in exchange for this pain, we're removing the threat of nuclear weapons hanging over our grandchildren's head by Armageddon psychopaths who think that bringing back the 12th Imam will happen via a nuclear weapon on America.
I hear you there. I fully support what the president's doing, and if gas is a little more expensive right now, so be it. Things will settle down. One more quick question before we take the same subject matter through the panel. I'm curious, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but the China and Japan, of course, have trillions of dollars collectively invested in our treasury notes and bills and bonds and so forth. And there's been a big sell-off. Any comments about that sell-off? And is that what Treasury Secretary is doing in terms of, no, just come down the ladder a bit for us and for the layman and make sense of it? Are we buying these bonds now because they're selling them and nobody wants them?
It's a little more complicated than that. What we're doing is creating a softer landing for ourselves by helping Japan. Here's the play. Japan has traditionally run its interest rates at 0%. The bankers buy up the yen, then they go issue loans out all over the world at a higher price, 5 to 15%, depending upon the risk. And then they scoop that scalp. They take that spread, and they just fill their coffers at the expense of the Japanese people. Meanwhile, there's a wrecking ball called inflation that goes all over the place. We're on the hook for that. So what happens here? Scott Bessent destroyed that arbitrage for the bankers by going in with Japan, buying 7 billion in yen from the U.S. Treasury, and then encouraging the Japanese to go ahead and do 70 billion in buying their own currency. Well, what this created was a very big problem for the bankers that have been playing that arbitrage. It's like a margin call. And when you get margin called like that, you're going to have to start selling things. So this is really about a weapon aimed at the globalists and going after the globalist banking systems that are pretty much illicit. But at the same time, we just went ripping right past 40 trillion in debt on our way to probably 42 trillion by the end of the year, possible. But if the dollar is going to be in severe trouble, if our yields are going to be so high that nobody wants our debt, like you say, John, then doesn't that set the grounds very nicely to go ahead and step on over to a new monetary system and leave the globalists holding the bag of their old debt system that they created?
Yeah, fascinating time. Global systemic reset. Things are resetting all over the place, some known, some unknown. Let's go through the panel. And Captain Pete Madison, how would you like to weigh in on this, sir?
Well, I haven't had the opportunity to read your article, General Holt, but I look forward to doing so after this. But from the sounds of things, I totally agree with the premise. Yeah, in military planning, there are a number of tools available to the military overall. We used to express it in terms of what's an acronym: DIME, Phil, diplomatic, uh, uh, intelligence, military, economic, financial, information, and legal, if I got that right. So you notice a couple of those are economic and financial, and so in those, we've never really had or viewed the Secretary of the Treasury as a an element of that, or a general, if you will, under those elements of power. But that is clearly what's being exercised here in a very strong way. And we know that money and things are like the lubrication, if you will, the fluid that makes some of these things happen, particularly for the banksters. Right. So a lot of efforts have been going on to cut off their funding. We've talked about it on previous shows. We've talked about the cartels. We've talked about the oil that the Chinese were getting out of Venezuela and Iran at a very reduced price compared to the global markets and things. So their funding is getting cut off in many areas. And I think a lot of people have misunderstood the whole Iranian evolution that we've been going through, this policing action. That is really a large focus of that has been in the economic front. Again, like we talked about before with regards to the Straits of Hormuz and the piracy construct that had been set up by the City of London. And then they set up their way of getting their financing back from that with Lloyd's of London and ensuring the very thing that they were creating the threat against. So we're seeing Scott Bessent and his team do an outstanding job at attacking this financial and monetary front.
Yes, I agree. It seems like, well, certainly in my lifetime, this is the first time the globalists, the central bank, the Federal Reserve, the central bank system of this world is they almost caught blindsided by the moves that this administration has been making in this military operation. And it's volatile and dangerous, but I believe that that we're making massive progress here, and it's going to be an interesting next year or so. Captain Guy Van Tresca, thank you, sir, for joining us. First time here on Eyes on Gitmo. How would you like to weigh in on this?
Well, from 2 points of view. One is the worst side would be nuclear war, because the last thing I did in uniform was help plan Able Archer in 1983, which was the most dangerous war game exercise ever conducted in history, because it brought us to DEFCON 1 simply by misreading the enemy and not understanding the gravity of what we were doing on our side and how the Soviet Union was reacting. And we were less than 10 minutes away from annihilation. And most people don't even know about it. So I take the threat of use of nuclear weapons extremely seriously, because I was intimate in one of those operations. The other thing is, we're really in a struggle of globalists versus sovereigntists. And the United States, as a constitutional republic, is the last bastion of sovereignty of all the nation states in the world. So what happened in the 20th century is that a lot of leaders just gave up on the concept of the nation state, and they started shifting towards globalism with unelected non-governmental organizations such as the UN, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the Bank for International Settlements, all the major central banks, the IMF, the World Bank. And there's about a dozen more of these institutions that, again, are unelected. They don't owe allegiance to any flag, and they're only interested in replicating multiple times the wealth that they've accumulated. They're the custodians of thousands of years of wealth. And that's all they care about. They don't care about individual sovereignty or national sovereignty. And so the United States stands, really, we're the last hill in their campaign to conquer humanity. So I look at these things, these financial steps, as the president's primary way of thwarting this effort. And I'm going to go against some of the thoughts here, in the sense that military action should always be the last resort. We were taught this in school, in our study of Clausewitz, in our study of the great strategic thinkers. And I personally think Scott Bessent's method could have been done first, and then only resort to kinetic action as a last resort. But I think, at least publicly, they were both done at the same time. Maybe General Holt can shed some light on that.
Any comments from General Holt or Captain Pete before we
Yeah,
move on?
I would say that it was in concert. What we're looking at is an orchestrated battle plan that involves all elements of power of the government. This whole campaign starts right after Inauguration Day by putting the Ford off the coast of Venezuela, and then nothing happens. What happens is the mother of all intel gathering operations starts to ensue. And the cartel guys who are all freaking out at that point that there's a flat top right off the coast, they're foolishly going to their phones and making phone calls and getting on email all over the place. Well, thank you very much for that, because we have technology to go ahead and start looking at what your relationships are and who you're talking to. And so right away, at the very outset, Scott Bessent is getting availed of all of that intelligence, and now he can start to draw a human terrain map pretty clearly about how all the money's being laundered, where it's going, how does it work with Iran, what's happening in Beijing and Moscow, what's happening in Switzerland, Hong Kong, because these are all nodes, Dubai, these are all nodes. And so the evidence gathering there, in addition to all the other good intel things that came out of Venezuela, really set the stage for an evaluation about when do you have to go militarily up against Iran. And I think in Secretary Rubio's own words, they would have done it differently, probably led the campaign with soft power to their druthers, but our allies also get a vote. And maybe he worded it poorly in his press conference, but certainly the pressure from Israel, which was viewing Iran as an existential threat at that moment before we hit the nuclear facilities, probably reshuffled the order of things, because the last thing we would have wanted is an Israel that made an assessment that the Samson option was going to be their best effort. So rather than do that, we struck them and we put a tourniquet on the whole thing for a year, started planning for a revolution. And then when this came up again, we actually took the lead of the whole thing and took the lead of the region. And while Israel's not very pleased, Israel certainly does not have the security issue that they had the night before we sent the B-2s. So I would say that's likely why. And President Trump, if he's proven one thing over the two administrations that he's had, he probably frustrates a lot of generals that he is not given to military action right away. But I think you've got to manage Israel and their concerns in the region.
Oh,
Yeah.
without question. Thank you, sir. And Captain Guy, thanks for the overall top soundbite, and that is globalists versus sovereignists. That's exactly what the big picture is, and everything falls underneath that as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to move us into some new territory, gentlemen, to our producer. Please run the clip.
It's a beautiful Tuesday morning here in Berry County, Michigan. I'm Sheriff Darleaf. An employee of the Michigan Secretary of State's office reported to me that non-citizens are automatically registered to vote when they change their address. The confidential informant provided evidence that the customer and automotive record system is programmed to congratulate and inform non-citizens that they are registered to vote. When the confidential informant provided proof to her supervisor that non-citizens are automatically registered to vote, the supervisor stated that the county clerk would identify the non-citizenship status. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this is not true. The county clerk is given access to the qualified voter roll after the Secretary of State registers a person to vote. The qualified voter roll does not designate a citizenship status. Once a person is registered to vote, they have the ability to receive a mail-in ballot or vote at the poll with their ID card. The polls do not verify citizenship status. My office has referred this matter for investigation to the United States Department of Justice of conspiracy to violate 18 U.S.C. 611 and place non-citizens on the qualified voter roll and in the jury pool. Additionally, I am asking the Michigan legislature to use its resources to remedy the illegal voter registration and placement in the jury pool immediately. My office encourages witnesses with additional evidence of non-citizens receiving automatic voter registration to report this evidence to my office or to your local sheriff. You know this is wrong. It's time to act. Have a good day.
Wow.
Wow, what a great sheriff we have there. Sheriff Richard Mack would be happy. You know, I'm gonna unpack a few more things. We're gonna have this panel weigh in all over the place. This is probably voter fraud and election theft, the most important aspect of the operation that we're engaged in right now to restore our constitutional republic. And so let's take a look at to my producer the next image 2, I believe it is. All right, so we see up on the screen, Pass the SAVE Act. Good luck with that. The Census Bureau has begun checking the voter records from 2020 against their citizenship records on the first 128 million voters. The Census Bureau proves that over 24,000 non-citizens voted illegally. The Census Bureau is going to analyze the next 32 million voters, and this number will explode. President Trump is speaking this way. He says, I won the election. We must pass the Save America Act. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Next image, please, image number 3. There it is, the Census Bureau. I just read that. There it is. You can see it, published by our Commander-in-Chief, President Donald J. Trump. We can see that the narrative needs to be raised. Many of our viewers know about this fraud and election theft since 2020, but what we call the target audience, they're waking up to this issue, and they need to wake up fast because we've lost control of our, as Benjamin Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it. We lost it on our watch, and we intend to take it back legally and constitutionally. So let's take a look at the next image, please. Next image is our good friend, Juan O'Savin. There he is in Korea. Now, I met with Juan face-to-face about 2.5 weeks ago. We sat down for about 9 hours in Bangkok, and then he had told me he was off to South Korea on mission, if you will, there. And we're going to unpack that a little bit. Let's run the clip. Juan O'Savin in South Korea. AWEB is run by a team of Chinese military specialists and political operatives to go into elections around the world. Juan has now reported 111 countries versus the 72 that we've known about, and to help steal the elections in all these locations. Juan says that if we were to go forward with the votes in November, and this is important, it would seal the fraud, because many of the 2026 candidates that won their primaries won them through fraud and without the voter rolls being cleaned. Very important subject. We'll start at the top of the panel. Retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt. Let's begin to unpack this important subject of voter fraud and election theft. How would you like to enter this subject?
Yeah, so let's add a country to the list. Breaking news, 3 days ago, the Zambian elections just went down, and they were stolen completely. So while they stole them through ballot box fraud foisted by the Chinese, then they took the existing president, and he sits in a jail cell tonight. And Zambia was an example of where you might have found hope that an African country might not end up as a basket case. But the Chinese are awfully serious about holding on to the commodities and resources that they command down there through the Belt and Road Initiative, while you have a lot of these smaller African nations in sub-Saharan Africa and hoping that the Trump way can win the day. And so but what I'm very grateful for is that the Chinese role in upending elections, including our own here at home, and not just through machines, but through influence operations, paying off politicians, paying off staffers, paying off campaign people, extortion, bribery, both sides of the aisle. This thing doesn't know parties. And then the countries that have helped and enabled China through it all. And so I agree with what Juan is saying about what happens when we get to the midterms here and how does that work. And do we highlight and lock in the highlighting of the fraud in our election system? Here's where if dear Juan was with us right now, I might push back a bit. We already know this. We know from the 2020 elections that our election system is cooked. And so I don't find a lot of use in practice bleeding with the American people who we just discussed are looking at some very interesting financial times ahead as that war wages on. So if we have the evidence of fraud, if we know that the primaries were fraudulently conducted, the SAVE Act can't save us. That we're not going to get it anyway because John Thune is, for whatever reason, compromised. At least that's the appearance. And so, you've heard me say it before, John. My druthers would be that the president goes ahead and shares this with the nation, declares a state of emergency. We either defer those elections or we get the military involved with paper ballots and the like. But again, to Juan's point, I don't know how you do that if you've got fraudulent candidates standing for election. So my druthers would be hit the freeze button, and maybe that's why we have conventions lined up for September out of both parties that will have delegates and they can pick their candidates. What I do know is that is such an airtight box of secrets that none of us can know how that whole thing is going to truly spill out at all, whether we're going to have the midterms or not. I would, if I was in a position to do so, I would urge the president to consider the declaration that the government is in a state of incapacitation.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Juan O'Savin. Again, we wish Juan were able to be here today, and if he pops in, we'll certainly get him a feed to comment. But he's on the record, I'm paraphrasing, stating that he believes there will be a pause, and it'll be somewhat of an extended pause. And he believes the president may make that announcement perhaps
I
in
misunderstood
October.
you then. Well, good. We're completely aligned.
Okay. Yes, and where Steve Bannon is on the record, I believe, stating potentially the president may make that announcement this very month in August. But it looks like it's coming. The SAVE Act, as you just stated, General Holt, can't save anything due to the nature of the fraudulent primaries. And so we find ourselves, it looks like all roads are leading to a declaration of emergency for elections and a long pause until we get things straight. Captain Guy, how would you like to weigh in on this? What do you think the president's move will be, and how do we get our elections straightened out?
Well, take Michigan and think about every blue state in the country. The same thing is probably going on there. I mean, I can almost guarantee it's going on in Minnesota and many others. Here in New York, I mean, believe it or not, I live in New York City. So I live in Manhattan. And one of my jobs as a real estate agent is corporate relocation. So I am constantly meeting new legal residents. So these are people that have residential visas, work visas. They immediately apply for a social security number. Once they get it, they can get a driver's license. Now, with all that information, they could probably register to vote, because I checked with the local election districts. They don't scrutinize things very, like, how do you prove citizenship? So many of these election boards are kind of lazy. If you go to them with let's say you came here illegally, you were given a temporary social security number by Mayorkas. Remember Mayorkas, the head of Homeland Security, the one who set up, he converted the Customs and Border Patrol to a reception center for 15 million illegal migrants. They were all given temporary social security cards, numbers. They were given temporary residential cards, and then they were given travel vouchers to get to a sanctuary city. And once they got there, they were put on health care, they were given free housing, and their kids went to school. Now, can you imagine once all these millions of people are in a system, they could probably fake their way into an election district and get registered. So the enormity of this fraud starts to hit you when you have some familiarity with all these things. And that's scary. Who's that young fellow, Nick Zerley, that 20-year-old kid? Is he the one who's... Yeah. So we need about 10,000 more of him hitting every election district in the blue states and uncovering this fraud.
Yes, you mentioned Mallorca. Thank goodness that's a piece of the past, but this may be above my pay grade. But when I look at the word treason in the dictionary, I might see his face. What a move that was! The way you just laid that out, unbelievable. We've got so much to clean up. Thank you, sir. Captain Pete, how would you like to weigh in on this? SAVE Act saves nothing. It won't pass anyway, as I see it. What do you think the president's move will be? And do you believe that the pause can be as long as a year or so?
Well, John, I think the SAVE Act, Save America Act, to be precise, was really meant to showcase these folks, give them an opportunity to step on the stage and show who they really were and really are. And it's clear that these folks are not going to vote for something that is going to potentially put them out of power. And that's the fundamental problem, right? And really that highlights the objective of the globalists, is if they can create an election illusion system that gives the appearance of sovereignty, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth, they lock in their power. Because once they have that system in place and they have the people in power who are there and they are controlled by the globalists at various levels of puppeteering, they are now assured of continued further control, and they can start to move their agenda at a faster pace. But the key is establishing this election illusion system, which they have done over the past 25, 30 years. And now people are becoming awakened to the illusion and understand how the illusion is being conducted. So a lot of what is being done is mapping that election illusion system and how exactly they have done it. And now we're reaching a time where it's effectively a crescendo. We have to step in and act. So what do I think? Personally, my opinion, based on what I've seen, the president is going to do. And I think it's consistent. If you look back at his statements all the way back when Twitter was called Twitter, not X, he was very clear about the stolen elections and the fraudulent nature of our election system. He's been extremely consistent. And he's called for paper ballots, hand mark, count more cast, et cetera. He said these things, but people just don't listen to what he's saying. And so I think we're building to the point where he already has a declaration of emergency that started when COVID happened. So, and remember that COVID was really designed to precipitate this election fraud in a grander scale. Because if you can lock everybody down and you can get them to think that, no, we don't need to go and vote in person, we can mail in ballots. Mail-in ballots are very, very difficult to ascertain, any kind of a, who actually submitted that ballot and chain of custody, et cetera. That was the point. So now you already have a state of emergency that has never been rescinded. So all he has to do is say, yes, we're now going to talk about the elections and put them on a pause. And we've talked about it on the show before that the answer is not the midterms. Because what about the people who were fraudulently elected in previous elections? You have to wipe the slate clean. The only real solution to get back to sovereignty and reestablish our constitutional republic is to wipe the slate clean of all the people who were elected fraudulently. That has tremendous implications. And I think the people, the white hats, if you will, have thought about this and they understand what that means. And we're coming upon that very soon. When? I would say it has to happen before the midterms themselves, and probably right around the time when the very first state starts its election process in mid-September.
I
What a
have to say,
critical
Pete,
time.
yeah, your use of the
Go
term
ahead, sir.
election illusion reminds me of the Ministry of Information in 1984. It's just what a great analogy. All right, thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. You bet. George Orwell, incredible vision that gentleman had. Captain Pete, thank you. I took a few notes I want to follow up. I think of Julian Assange, who said when all is said and done, 95% or something of that nature of our elected officials won't be around. It looks like we may be heading in that direction. But more importantly, you used the term the president, you think may have been using the Save America Act as a showcasing to smoke things out and to raise the awareness and so forth and so on. I think you're absolutely right. And what a lot of the public don't understand, those that don't really get that this is a military operation that's unfolding here. And you raised the point of the declaration of emergency that we're already operating under as a result of the pandemic or COVID back in 2020. Those are very important dots that you've connected. Well, potentially a dangerous time ahead as well in 2027 to the best of my knowledge, correct me anybody in this panel if I'm wrong, I don't think we've ever suspended elections in this nation's history. Am I right? Anybody? At least in my lifetime, do not recall this happening. And of course, we know the left and our good friends in the mainstream media are going to have a field day against our commander-in-chief, President Donald J. Trump, when he suspends elections, and then you dovetail in the Fauci hearings, which we're going to get to in a moment. They're going to position the president as a dictator, as a fascist, as a Nazi, and so forth and so on, and try and create further division. And I'm encouraging our viewers to listen to these experts on this very panel and understand the military operation that's unfolding and restoring free and fair elections legally and constitutionally, and support our commander-in-chief at this time in war. Thank you, Captain Pete. You stirred me up. I'd like to move into another subject, another important subject. We'll go back to the top of the panel with Brigadier General Blaine Hull. It's been 25 years now as we are coming up on 9/11. Today, do we have a Muslim and Sharia law problem here in America? And if so, General Holt, what is your level of concern and what can and should be done about this issue?
I think in order to tackle this, what we have to be demanding as a nation is we got to go back to that place. We got to go back to 9/11. We got to go do a full autopsy. We've got to go pre 9/11. We've got to go into all of the information that was out there from a banking perspective, an intelligence community perspective. Things as circumstantial as Brennan being a consular officer in Saudi Arabia, and in what other capacities he worked at the embassy in Saudi Arabia when he issued those visas to several of the terrorists. And there's a lot of speculation. There is a lot of, for lack of a better term, conspiracy theories. That's not to say that there's not a conspiracy. I want to be very clear about that. Because the retail version, as we have gone on through the years, has not added up. And certainly, if we just took the retail version of 9/11, lock, stock, and barrel, that's exactly what happened before our very eyes. And then we went off to wars that led to nothing but dead people and a lot of money gone and wrecked lives. Then if we just took it at wholesale value, then we've lost this war. And you don't need a bigger guy will tell you this, but you don't need a bigger symbol of that than a communist Muslim mayor who supports terrorists at the helm in New York City. And the call to prayer in Times Square, what a contrast to watching two towers fall symmetrically perfectly next to Tower 7 that also comes down in the same fashion, and all the like. And I would say, and add to that, many decades later, you have October 7th in Israel, another horrific event. The Israelis have to go back to October 7th, and they've got to conduct the same autopsy. And what we'll find, and I'll end it here, what we'll find is criminality on both sides of the aisle, and we'll find bad guys that will horrify people who had so much trust and confidence in people that stood up that day and with straight faces told us this would be a different kind of war and what we had to go do. And I'm really very grateful for guys like Richard Gage of the Architects Association and Representative Kurt Weldon, my dear friend Tony Schaefer, who to this day are not getting off of this. They're not letting it go, and nor should we as a nation. We are going to have to confront these ghosts in our past if we're going to be able to move forward.
Thank you, sir. Captain Guy, you're in the eye of the beast there. You're right there in New York. You've got your mayor in there. Well, how would you like to weigh in on this important subject?
Yeah, well, I live 1 mile from Ground Zero, and that morning, I didn't go outside early. I heard hundreds and hundreds of sirens all at once, and I went, "Oh, okay, something's wrong." So I turned on the TV, and all the TV stations are blank except one. CBS had their antenna on top of the Empire State Building, and that's why they were able to broadcast. So I ran outside, ran to Broadway, and I looked straight down Broadway, and I saw. I think that by then the first tower had fallen, and then I saw the North Tower falling. My first thought is, what took them so long? Because I knew all about the '93 bombing. There's a lot of hair-raising stories about that one that could add to the crescendo of 9/11. I went to Washington, D.C. in May or June of 2002. I think it was May. And I attended the very first 9/11 Truth meeting, except it wasn't called that. It was called Unanswered Questions of 9/11. And that's where I met Catherine Austin Fitz, Brian, I think it was Brian Singerman, who was the consular officer in Jeddah who refused the visas for all those Saudis who eventually were the hijackers. And finally, I think Brennan came down to him and said, "You will approve these." And he was there. And Michael Rupert, who wrote Crossing the Rubicon, a tremendous book about 9/11. And well, I mean, there's so many stories I can tell you about that movement, but eventually it was hijacked by people with louder mouths. And so once that happened, I won't mention any names, but you can guess which gruff Texan I'm talking about. And once the movement was taken over, it was easily dismissed. And we couldn't get the scholarly response to the questions. But now there's so much evidence. In fact, the first week of September, Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers is hosting a symposium, a 25th anniversary, where a lot of the evidence will be presented. So we still don't know what happened. The one thing I can say for sure is it didn't happen the way the government told us. That's for sure. So the investigation must clarify all the possibilities of how it happened, and by first establishing that the official narrative is an outright lie. So, I mean, there's so much to talk about with 9/11.
There is. Thank you, sir. It's my understanding. I wish that Juan and Matt Meck were able to be here today. I can't put words in their mouth, but it's my understanding that Juan may be addressing yet another revelation behind the attacks of 9/11 at the summit in Las Vegas. So folks, get out to Vegas if you can. And we'll be streaming it live, JMC Broadcasting, for those in America and around the world that cannot get there. But it's my understanding that Juan is going to be revealing some information at this summit and discussing this important topic. Thank you. Captain Pete Matasu, important subject, 9/11 coming up. We've got a Muslim mayor in New York who is really just trampling on the tragedy. What's your view of this, sir?
I call him Mad Manny.
Mad Manny, that works for me. I'd rather have Mad Max. Captain Pete, jump into the arena here, if you will.
I think for those of us with gray hair, or maybe have lost some of their hair on the panel here, it's very personal because we were around and we can remember that day very, very clearly, that moment, and the impact it had on our decision on, do we stay in the military, do we go? There's always those decisions that military go through, and there are certain events which may catapult them in one direction or the other. And that was one for me. That was a catapulting to stay and to, I said, essentially, I can't leave now. Well, yeah, what we've been talking about on the show a lot is, and mentioned it even on this session, is the term illusion. And I think what we're going to discover is this, the 9/11 facade was a masterful, demonic illusion that was created for a bunch of purposes, all of them nefarious. And as the curtain is pulled back, I think we're going to be shocked. You tied it initially in your opening there, John, to Sharia law. I think that's an element. But there's a lot more to it. Sharia law is one thing that the globalists use. They created many, many moons ago, and they're going to try that and inject many other things. But I encourage your audience to go and do some research on one of the things that was an artifact or came out of the 9/11, and that is the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act, some people may think it did a lot of good things, but how many people are sick and tired of going through TSA? And I'll stop there. But if you look at who wrote the Patriot Act and when, right? Just pull the thread on that one. And my research indicates that Patriot Act was written in 1993. By none other than Joe Biden.
Ooh.
So go do your own research and go look. But my watching a YouTube video of him introducing this on the floor, and it was rejected by the Republicans at the time. They said it would be too overreaching, but it was in response, I believe, to what you referred to, the 1993 bombing. So again, they are in a long war. Make no mistake about it. They're in a long war. And 9/11 and all the 93 event, all these things are tied together. They are patient, and they have been chipping away and chipping away and chipping away while we fell asleep. We are asleep no more. It is time that the sleeping giant arises if we're going to take back our nation and sovereignty, and we've got to put a stop to this now.
That's something about these darn neocons. They've infiltrated both parties. So it was the Democratic neocons who came up with the Patriot Act after 93. And I don't know, Congress had a spine back then. And they said, are you crazy? We're not going to pass this. This violates everything in the Bill of Rights. And then 7-8 years later, a much bigger attack occurs, and whoosh, automatic approval. And nobody in Congress confessed. Well, I think the only person who read the Patriot Act was Ron Paul. Everyone else approved it without reading it.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Captain Pete and the rest of the panel, please weigh in, if you will, on this final question concerning the 9/11 issue as it relates to Sharia law and Muslims in official elected positions in our government. Should they be permitted? Should it be allowed for a Muslim who practices Sharia law to be on a ballot in this country, Captain Pete?
Very simple answer, John. I think we as Americans need to look at is Sharia law consistent with the supreme law of the land, the Constitution? That's it.
And I would say, remember, the Bill of Rights also protects the rights of people to practice their own religion. So you can't ban a religion or the principles of a religion. That would be unconstitutional. But what you can do as a legislature at any level, municipal, state, or federal, is you compare the principles of Sharia law to the Bill of Rights. And who wins? It's pretty clear. So it's not that you're banning Sharia law or banning Islam or banning Muslims. It's that you are pointing out these, in a very literal and legal way, these violate our founding principles. Therefore, they cannot be approved.
Well said. General Holt, do you want to weigh in on this this particular aspect?
Islam is much more. I mean, you can read the Quran. Much more of a political movement, and I guess the story is this is one of the three great religions. And I understand Muslims who are listening to me are probably deeply offended by the notion that it's more of the politics. But then I would commend them to just say, well, let's look at the last 50 years of history. Let's look at the last 600 years of history in the prism of the politics of it. And then we get back to a book that was written by the Muslim Brotherhood in, I think it was 1978, 79 timeframe. But it's the book, it's called Jihad. And the book Jihad talks openly about the takeover of the West and about how they will do what the strategy to take over of the West is through immigration and multiplication, meaning get into another country and then create enclaves, procreate as fast as you possibly can, and then co-opt the political system. That's exactly what has happened. And so what we don't want to see happen is our Constitution and the protections it affords be used as the very weapon that cuts our throats. And so we're the threat. We can see the threat here in the United States, Texas, Michigan, Wisconsin. But if you need an example of where this goes, look no further than Ireland, the UK, and most of Western Europe, where, in the UK, you have whole swaths of cities that are no-go zones. Sharia law is now openly talked about as something that can be implemented. And honestly, this is how well-meaning liberal democracies go into the long night and commit suicide. And what we must do is, and I think this is where Guy is going, is if you want to say things or advocate for things and you're in an official position and those things are antithetical to our Constitution, then you must be held accountable for them. If you're a governor of a state and you say that there is a development that's masquerading as a city and they can have Sharia law there, well, then you need to be removed through our judicial system as the governor because you have violated your oath to the Constitution. So the true north and the compass in this thing to prevent this and to have Islam be a religion on an equal footing with the other religions is to enforce this and not get all cagey about, we'll be considered bigots if we don't have a no-go zone and allow for a Sharia law enclave. That's absolutely ridiculous. And you're also, by the way, castigating women to abuse at a minimum. And so people should read the book Jihad. It's available online. And what that very dystopian world looks like And defense of the Constitution means doing uncomfortable things, and it may be uncomfortable, but you can pat yourself on the back that you were politically correct right up until the point where you were paying a what they call a Giza tax for not being Muslim in the Western democracy that you live in. And that's the vector that we're on. And by the way, this is a weapon of the city of London and the financialists. This is clearly just putting red ants and black ants into the same damn jar,
Yep.
covering the lid, shaking the jar, having a big damn war, depopulating us, and controlling and enslaving people with a Hegelian dialectic of, now we're going to give you Patriot Act on steroids because you guys can't behave. That's that and those. So probably unpopular thoughts with everyone, but I say them quite unapologetically.
Let's remember
Well,
that all three religions are the result of Abraham. They're called the Abrahamic religions, and they've been manipulated by these globalists throughout history as a divide and conquer strategy. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great, Captain Pete. General Holt's firing us up. You got anything you'd like to follow up on before I comment and take us into Dr. Fauci's world?
Right. He's spot on, and I think we have to be unapologetic about our defense of the Constitution and our constitutional republic, right? And stop worrying about offending this or offending that, right? Because that's the narrative that the globalists want to try to push. Is, oh, you're not respecting other people, you're not this. No, I'm standing up and I'm being America first, and I'm defending our Constitution, the supreme law of the land, the Bill of Rights, and the rights of every American. And if I have little enclaves going on, then the question should be, well, are those enclaves subject to the supreme law of the land or not? Very simple question.
Mm-hmm. I think of cocktail parties, conversations. Let's see, what have we spent the last hour on? Fighting for a sound currency and financial system with honesty, fraud in elections, 9/11 catastrophe and the truth behind that nightmare, the what'd you call it, a masterful demonic illusion, and now we're going to step into the world of the pandemic, COVID. Again, maybe not the most popular folks at the cocktail party, but you know what, folks? I can't think of anything else to talk about at the cocktail party but these subjects. And that takes us into Dr. Fauci, back to the top of the panel with General Holt. Dr. Fauci's associate, David Marnes, if we have an image, I don't remember if I submitted it, let's put it up there. But Dr. Fauci's associate, David Marnes, just pleaded guilty to conspiracy in a scheme to avoid the Freedom of Information Act requests and the Federal Records Act connected to COVID-19 research grants. What does this mean? How significant is this? And will this begin the cascade of dominoes, finally, concerning the COVID pandemic? And just when will this move, in my opinion, because justice, in my opinion, is not going to be served in the civilian system, particularly on this issue. So when will this move into tribunals for processing, General Holt?
Yeah, I mean, I would have told you it would have happened a long time ago. I think that, as Americans, we're waiting on the season of accountability, not just for the criminals of the pandemic, or the fake pandemic, but with very real deaths and very real consequences. But on all of these things that we've been talking about, we have a co-opted government. We have the swamp, whether it's elected, deep state, staffers, cubicle warriors, lobbyists, big government, monopolists, the foreign espionage agents that roam all over the city looking for more to buy off. These people all need to go to jail in some fashion or form, and beyond jail if necessary. So now let's get to this mass murder situation, which I'll just use Dr. Peter McCullough's own study that 74% of the deaths out of the pandemic came from the vaccine. And here we are, and I am being critical of this admin right now. Here we are, allowing a $2 billion award of more COVID shots for Pfizer, and now the mRNA technology flu shot, which doesn't even have placebo trials behind it, but yet it's approved, going out. And now we've got the United States Navy saying, yeah, and it's required, by the way. So I don't have a lot of, let's just say, I don't have any lack of concern about this particular issue. Maybe now that Moran is rolled up, he's going to ask for some sort of deal, and it's going to go finger a lot of people. But they have everything they need on Fauci right now. They need to go ahead and nail him and disregard this stupid auto pen pardon, and then get him to flip on a whole bunch of people, executives and stuff. But this gets us into one of these interesting holes. Is this what is going to happen? And I just have the timing wrong, that it wasn't to happen earlier. It's for very good reason going to happen later in the president's plan. I certainly hope so, but I certainly also hope that he's not blind to the fact of the dangers of the technologies of these gene therapies, which were recategorized as vaccines, and then it gets us to other very uncomfortable places like the Epstein lists. And I don't just mean the sex and the trafficking and the terrible things done to kids. I'm talking about the whole ball of wax and the banking and all of the other stuff. You can have your nation be partly in a integrity situation with one sliver of the government, and you're going to lose the whole nation anyway. Or you can just go, you know what? We're in trouble. Let's go ahead and take a knee, hit pause, and we're going to go round up all these people. And that's exactly what I'd be urging the president to be doing.
Yeah, well said. Captain Guy, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the Blaine on his show Dangerous Intellectuals recently interviewed my friend Celia Farber. I would recommend everybody watch that interview. Celia knows the crimes of Anthony Fauci better than anybody. She provided almost all of the detail in Bobby Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci. His sins go back to 1984, to the AIDS crisis. He literally created the job that he's held for the last 45 years or whatever it is. So what I'd like to see, I have this fantasy. Every physician in the public health service, which includes NIH and HHS and all those agencies, which, by the way, is the largest industrial complex in the nation. We spend $4 trillion a year on medicine. That's 3 times more than the official Pentagon budget. And we have the worst health outcomes of any industrial nation in the world, and even most of the non-industrial nations in the world. So why doesn't anyone look at that? But here's what I would, going back to the public health service, every one of those physicians is a reserve officer in one of the branches of the U.S. military. You could reactivate Fauci's commission. He's probably a retired colonel in the Army. Put him in front of a military tribunal as an officer, and then execute a sentence from there. That would be a legal option right there.
Execute a sentence, and the sentence is execute. So let me ask you, sir.
I didn't want to say that, but yeah.
Good choice of words. Good plug for my show. Thanks.
Celia Farber. Farber.
Yeah, Farber. Thank you.
She's courageous. Very courageous woman.
Thank you for raising all those issues. Captain Pete, weigh in on this, if you will, sir. We got Fauci in the hot seat. We got to get justice. Bottom line.
Yes, we do. And John, I think we brought a couple of topics here, and it seems like there are a number of these very heavyweight, large things, whether they be 9/11, whether they be Fauci and the COVID fiasco and such. All these and the Epstein list, et cetera, are waiting in the wings for justice. And So I do think that it is tied to this election pause. I think the period of time after the elections are paused and this, what I personally believe, this is my view, that the slate is going to be wiped clean, and that we're going to enter into a time of, law of war manual. I think it's chapter 11, military occupation, if you will, where the country is divided into districts, and those districts are run by some sort of military oversight, during which time there's a massive clean out. That could take a year or more. But it's, down at the local level, we see it. We see it with the developers here in Florida, really strong arming the politicians and to get what they want, and to bring in substandard housing, et cetera, et cetera. So the corruption is at so many levels. You have to think, how could this be cleaned out in a day? And it can't. It's going to take a while. So I think during this time of a pause, there's going to be a massive cleanup operation, and it's going to involve. I'm reminded of the Q post that talks about, "Are you ready to serve again? Remember your oath."
Wow, powerful segment. Thank you, sir. The Law of War Manual, Chapter 11, folks. I have a copy of the Law of War Manual up on our website. And you're right, Captain Pete. During this pause, the cleanup operation, which of course has been ongoing for some years, is got to escalate, and the people have got to see the justice. We're going to we got a little bit of time left, but I want to summarize this show. We've talked about election suspension. We've talked about this issue with the pandemic and Fauci, and 70%, I think the quote was a bit ago, people died from the so-called vax versus the COVID itself.
The kill shot.
The kill shot, you bet. We didn't talk about Russiagate, but silence and seemingly no headlines doesn't mean there isn't activity taking place behind the scenes that has not been forgotten about, and that'll come up. We have economic disruptions on the horizon in a very big way as we begin to restore sound money and so forth. Now we'll go back to the top of the panel and we'll comb through and have an open discussion about this. But with all of that happening and all of the actions, known and or unknown, that are ongoing and yet to happen, we come back to things, General Holt, we used to speak about when we first launched Eyes on Gitmo, but I think it's worthy of raising this issue again, particularly the latter part of this year and certainly all of 2027, with all the progress that we will be making in this military operation. What is your level of concern about retaliation? The exit ramps seem to be, by and large, closed for the enemy. They've got nowhere to go and nowhere to hide. We have everything on everyone, and we're doing something about it, and this is now going to slowly be revealed to the public. With that being said, in my humble opinion, General Holt, what is your level of concern about disruptions and safety for the American people this year and next year? And that's the question.
Tremendous. They're tremendous. Look, I'm an optimist. I'm my dear friend Mark Atwood he calls himself an apocalyptimist. I like that word. I'm going to adopt that. But one of the things that you have to be very sober about is that your enemy gets a vote, and in that cliche there is much wisdom, because while the campaign may be great, the stuff we read in Q, the military's the only way, it had to be this way, here comes the big scare. But however you want to track it, fine. And we should be of good nature and good heart and prayerful all the time for success, and that the pain to Americans through this process is minimized. The pain to the free world is minimized. However, if I'm to be very brutally honest, the enemy is not without options at this stage of the game. The other part is you have to look at the enemy's motivations. Many of them will be playing for their very necks. And they didn't control the world and enslave the world from the fall of Rome to today in all these different incarnations of these families that I would say, are of the world. We are in the world. They are of the world. And they don't plan on losing that anytime soon with the power and the wealth that they lock on and have amassed. The other part is they believe they're at the eve of their great success. And what success looks like in their world is AI, quantum computing, robotics come online in a way that makes most of us redundant and makes their eugenicist dreams of depopulation all the more appealing. Meaning they really do mean it when they call you a useless eater. and so we see through the Treasury's efforts, like I wrote about in my article today, that we're now putting them under more and greater pressure. So does a determined enemy that's in a desperate stance on the back foot start to look at President Trump and where his frailties may be, not trying to assassinate him, but, you know, we talked about it earlier. The president does not have a proclivity for violence. That is to his credit. But I can see an enemy putting terms in front of him that would encourage him to rethink his plan and what he has to do in execution going forward. I also believe that they have the assets on the ground to do horrendous things. And so if that's accounted for in our military planning, I think that's great. But I don't think we should ever be arrogant or underestimate what an enemy that has controlled this planet for no less than thousands of years is going to go quiet into the night because we bankrupted a few of them and bagged a few of them.
Yeah.
So well said. Captain Guy, you want to contribute to that, please?
Well, I don't plan on jumping on the tail of a dying beast, that's for sure. But you better be aware that that tail is whipping around, and get out of its way, because it wields tremendous power, earthly power. And the thing that we have on our side is spiritual power, because everyone, regardless of their inclination or not towards religion or towards spirituality, there is a God flame inside of us, and we have to reignite it, live in our integrity, acknowledge our sovereignty, and build communities of like-minded folks who may not look alike and share the same thoughts, but they are absolutely committed in their hearts and souls and minds to this idea of human independence, human sovereignty, and national sovereignty in the case of the United States. And if we can do that, we'll come to the other side. And there will be a golden age on Earth. I am absolutely convinced of that. It's not far away. But between now and then, however many years it'll take, there's going to be turbulence, a lot of it. And so as you look upon your life today and what you consider normal, get ready for some abnormalities to increase, to agitate. There's kind of a friction going on, and that friction will increase. And it's almost necessary in order to create a tranquility where the planet is living in balance. That means we have to live in balance with nature, with ourselves, and then we'll usher in a golden age.
Thank you, sir. I hope our audience is listening very intently to our military experts here on this panel. This isn't podcast is shooting the breeze, to use an old expression. Captain Pete, we're talking about the safety of what's to come in the retaliation as we continue the battles that continue to rage on. How do you see this, and what's your advice to our viewers?
Well, I think we are definitely coming into a very trying time. And that's not said with negativity, that's said with a lot of hope, because you have to acknowledge that there's a problem, and then you have to be willing to do something about it. If you are willing to get that, what is on the other side, the victory that's on the other side, and the victory is true sovereignty for the people, where real choice is still available for folks, and not an illusion of choice. And I'm reminded of Haggai chapter 2, which talks about, yet once more in a little while I will shake the heavens and the earth until only that which cannot be shaken remains. I believe that's what we were going through now, and it's going to get much shakier in the near future. As General Holt and Guy so eloquently said, whether it be on the tail of a dragon or just the cornered dog, that's what we're up against right now. And I say, but God. And so prayer required, and believe that when we do things the right way, when we do things righteously, when we seek God's wisdom and to obey what he has to say, then he will act on our behalf, and he will see us through this. But it's a prayer required point in time. We have to be willing to say, here I am, send me. Am I willing to sacrifice during this time for that greater thing? And I was thinking a while ago about, who was the first inhabitant of the earth after God created the earth? And, you think, okay, it's Adam, right? God created Adam out of the dust of the earth. But really it was, Satan fell like lightning, right? And he fell to the earth. He was cast down to the earth. So Satan was really the first inhabitant of the earth, and he was given dominion over it. Jesus acknowledged that he was given dominion over it. So when, God created man, he created man where? Did he create him in this little safe area? No. I mean, what was he thinking? He created man in the very spot where the rebel was cast. I mean, it baffles my mind that he would actually do something like that. So therefore, what's the natural conclusion? The natural conclusion is that we are a key element in this solution to the problem of dealing with the rebel, right? And so we take hope in that, because someone, namely the creator of heaven and earth, thinks enough of us that we can be a key element in this battle against evil.
Thank you, sir. Well, we're going to wrap this broadcast up. Captain Pete, is there a place that people can follow you beyond this broadcast? Do you have any link to the public, or are you remaining not accessible, if you will?
Well, it's not that I'm not accessible. So Matt, if you get a hold of Matt Meck, you can get a hold of me. And Matt and I are like two peas in a pod, so we talk all the time.
Great. Well, thank you. So what I meant is, some folks have a website and an email address, but thank you, Captain Pete, for being here with us each and every month. I encourage our viewers to keep visiting this broadcast. It is monthly because we're heading into September, October, November, and we can clearly see that there's quite a road ahead of us. Brigadier General Blaine Holt, what's the best place for people to follow you and your work beyond this broadcast?
I appreciate that. Come visit me at dangerousintellectuals.com. You can pick your platform for our show, and then on the More page there, you can read the book review of the month. You can check out my latest article at newsmax.com. It's all there for you. And we just joined YouTube for the first time, so I've extended out to that platform, and the start of that with episode 49 with John Leake was I was absolutely blown away, and I really appreciate Guy bringing out the episode we did on episode 48 with Celia Farber, one of the most inspiring heroes that are unsung in our country that I've ever met, and the things that she endured all by herself with no social media, no one to hear her scream. As an early investigative journalist, a young investigative journalist, was great. So dangerousintellectuals.com. I will be keeping at it. And Monday, I've got Irish economist, brilliant young superstar, Melissa Siume, and she will join me. And that will be a great episode as well.
Thank you, General Holt. Captain Guy, any place people can reach out to you, the public?
Sure. Not a website, but I do have a Substack page. It's literally my name, Guy Ventresca. So you can just look me up on Substack. I've got a few articles there, but you can message me there as well.
Excellent, thank you. And Captain Pete will be here, and we appreciate you, sir, being here each and every month to share your wisdom and your experience and your inspiration, and keeping us reminded that we need to ground ourselves in our faith, pray, plan, and prepare. This has been a great episode. I can't thank you, gentlemen, enough for your continued service. As you know, the oath never sunsets. I salute you, gentlemen, on behalf of America and the rest of the world that's watching this broadcast for your